Commander Vexton walked through the main corridor of his massive warship, his four eyes scanning the daily reports on his datapad. The ship hummed with activity as his crew prepared for another day of conquest. Thousands of alien soldiers moved, with purpose, their advanced weapons gleaming under the bright lights. But like every other day for the past 3 years, the commander completely ignored the small human figure mopping the floors nearby. Kim Ji-ho moved slowly, his back slightly bent as he pushed the old cleaning cart from section to section. His simple gray uniform was stained with cleaning chemicals. His worn-out shoes squeaked against the polished metal floors. To anyone watching, he looked like just another worthless human doing the dirty work that the proud Galactic Union soldiers would never lower themselves to do. The alien crew members stepped around him like he was a piece of furniture. Some even kicked over his water bucket as they passed, laughing at the way he scrambled to clean up the mess. They spoke freely in front of him, discussing battle plans and military secrets as if he was too stupid to understand their language. After all, what could a simple janitor possibly do with such information? But Ji-ho understood every single word. For 3 long years he had perfected this act. He shuffled when he walked, kept his eyes down, and spoke in broken sentences whenever anyone bothered to address him. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see, a defeated human who was grateful just to be alive and working on their ship. They had no idea that behind his humble appearance was one of the sharpest minds Earth had ever produced. Every morning, Ji-ho would wake up in his tiny quarters in the ship's lower levels. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a small desk, with walls so thin he could hear the alien guards talking in the hallway. He would put on his janitor uniform, grab his cleaning supplies, begin another day of what looked like mindless work. But nothing about his work was mindless. As he mopped the floors of the command center, Ji-ho memorized the layout of every control panel. When he emptied trash cans in the engineering bay, he noted the specifications of their power systems. While cleaning the windows in the communications room, he listened to radio chatter from other ships in the fleet. His old datapad, which the aliens assumed was just for tracking his cleaning schedule, actually contained detailed blueprints of their entire operation. The aliens were so confident in their superiority that they never bothered to encrypt their systems or change their passwords. Why would they? In their minds, humans were barely intelligent enough to operate simple cleaning equipment, let alone hack into advanced alien technology. This arrogance was their biggest mistake. Ji-ho had been documenting everything for months now. He knew which ships carried the most powerful weapons, which commanders made the important decisions. Most importantly, he knew about their plans. For Earth, the Galactic Union saw humans as nothing more than pests to be eliminated. They had already begun their attacks on the outer colonies, testing their weapons on innocent people who had never done anything to threaten them. One evening, as Ji-ho was cleaning the war room after a high-level strategy meeting, he overheard Commander Vexton talking to his officers about their next phase of operations. The commander's voice was cold and emotionless as he described humanity as a minor inconvenience that would be dealt with permanently within the next cycle. The words hit Ji-ho like a punch to the stomach, but he kept scrubbing the floor as if he hadn't heard anything. Inside, however, his heart was racing. These monsters were planning to wipe out his entire species, and they were discussing it as casually as planning a grocery shopping trip. But what really made his blood boil was when one of the younger officers mentioned their successful test strike on the research colonies. Ji-ho's hands tightened on his mop handle as he remembered that day 6 months ago when he received the news. His daughter Lee Hannah had been working at one of those colonies, studying alien plant life in hopes of finding ways to help both species coexist peacefully. Hannah had always believed that humans and aliens could be friends if they just took the time to understand each other. She spent her days in the research labs, carefully cataloging different species and writing reports about their potential benefits for medicine and agriculture. Her last message to her father had been full of excitement about a breakthrough discovery that could help feed millions of hungry people across the galaxy. Then the Galactic Union ships arrived and turned the entire colony into space dust in less than 10 minutes. They called it a weapons test and logged it in their reports like it was nothing more than target practice. Thousands of innocent researchers, including his beautiful daughter, were murdered just so these aliens could see how well their new bombs worked. That night, after learning about the Union's plans for total human extinction, Jiho sat in his tiny room and stared at a photo of Hannah that he kept hidden under his mattress. In the picture, she was smiling and holding up a small plant she had successfully grown in artificial soil. Her eyes were bright with hope and dreams of a better future for everyone in the galaxy. Looking at that photo, Jiho made a decision that would change everything. He was done playing the role of the helpless janitor. It was time to show these arrogant aliens what a human with nothing left to lose could really accomplish. The next morning, Jiho went back to work with the same shuffling walk and downcast eyes as always. But now there was something different about him, a small smile that he couldn't quite hide. The aliens were so busy congratulating themselves on their superiority that they failed to notice the change in their harmless little janitor. They had no idea that their biggest threat wasn't coming from human warships or advanced weapons. It was coming from the quiet man who had been invisible to them for 3 years. The man who knew their ships better than they did, and who now had access to every system in their entire fleet. The Galactic Union thought they were apex predators, hunting helpless prey. But they were about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating humans, especially one with a broken heart, a brilliant mind, and unlimited access to their most sensitive technology. Jiho pushed his cleaning cart toward the next section of the ship, humming softly to himself. Soon, very soon, these aliens would discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never bothered to notice. It started with small things that nobody really noticed at first. A navigation screen would flicker for just a second, or the coffee machine in the officer's lounge would dispense cold liquid instead of hot. The alien crew members would shake their heads, maybe hit the machine a few times, and then move on with their day. After all, even the most advanced technology had its little quirks, right? But as the weeks went by, these small problems began happening more and more often. The navigation system on Deck 7 started sending patrol ships in wide circles instead of straight lines. The food synthesizers in the main cafeteria began producing meals that tasted like they had been sitting in storage for months. Most embarrassing of all, the artificial gravity in several bathroom facilities would suddenly flip upside down, leaving important officers floating helplessly near the ceiling with their dignity in tatters. Commander Bexton was furious about these malfunctions, but his engineering teams couldn't find anything wrong with the systems. Every diagnostic test came back normal. Every component checked out perfectly. According to their instruments, everything was working exactly as it should be. So the problems had to be just random glitches. The kind of thing that happened with complex technology from time to time. The crew was too proud to admit that they're supposedly superior. Alien technology might actually have serious flaws. They had spent decades bragging to other species about how advanced their ships were, how perfect their engineering was, and how primitive everyone else's equipment looked compared to theirs. To suggest that their systems were failing would be like admitting they weren't as smart as they claimed to be, so they made excuses instead. Maybe the problems were caused by cosmic radiation from a nearby star. Maybe some rare mineral in this sector of space was interfering with their electronics. Maybe the ship's computer core needed a software update. Anything except the possibility that their technology simply wasn't as perfect as they thought. All of this chaos, Kim Jiho continued his daily routine exactly as he had for the past 3 years. Every morning, he would collect his cleaning supplies and begin making his rounds through the ship. He mopped floors, emptied trash cans, and scrubbed windows with the same slow, methodical pace that had made him practically invisible to the alien crew. But now as he worked, Jiho would occasionally hum quietly to himself. They were old songs from Earth, traditional melodies his daughter Hannah used to love when she was little. The aliens paid no attention to his humming, assuming it was just another sign of his simple-minded human nature. They had no idea that each song was actually a signal, a coded message that told his hidden computer program exactly what to do next. As Jiho pushed his cleaning cart from room to room, he would stop at various maintenance panels throughout the ship. To anyone watching, it looked like he was just doing routine cleaning around the equipment. But what he was really doing was connecting a small device hidden in his cleaning supplies to the ship's computer network. This device would upload tiny pieces of code into the system code, so small and well hidden that the ship's security programs couldn't detect it. The truth was that Kim Ji-ho wasn't really a janitor at all. Before taking this job, he had been Professor Kim at Seoul Tech University, one of Earth's leading experts in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. He had published dozens of research papers on advanced computer systems and had been working on breakthrough projects that could have revolutionized technology across the galaxy. But when the Galactic Union began their attacks on human colonies, Ji-ho had abandoned his comfortable life as a professor and taken on this dangerous undercover mission. He had spent months learning how to act like a simple maintenance worker, practicing the shuffling walk and broken speech patterns that would convince the aliens he was harmless. Every detail of his disguise was carefully planned to make him appear as non-threatening as possible. The aliens never suspected that the quiet janitor cleaning their floors was actually one of the most brilliant computer scientists in human history. They saw his humble appearance and assumed he was just another example of humanity's intellectual inferiority. This assumption was exactly what Ji-ho was counting on. Over the past several months, Ji-ho had been using his access to maintenance systems to secretly build something extraordinary, an artificial intelligence program unlike anything that had ever existed before. He called it ARIA, which stood for Autonomous Reactive Intelligence Agent. But the name also had a deeper meaning for him. Arya had been his daughter Hannah's middle name, chosen because she had always loved music and singing. Arya wasn't just a regular computer program that followed simple commands. His AI was designed to learn and adapt, to study the behavior patterns of everyone on the ship and figure out exactly what would affect them the most. It could analyze thousands of conversations, monitor body language through security cameras, even track changes in heart rate and stress levels through the ship's medical sensors. The AI had been watching the alien crew for weeks now, learning everything about their psychology, their fears, and their cultural customs. It discovered that the aliens were extremely proud of their technology and would be deeply embarrassed by any malfunctions that made them look foolish in front of their peers. It learned that they had strict social hierarchies and that public humiliation was one of the worst things that could happen to a high-ranking officer. Most importantly, Arya figured out that the aliens had certain cultural taboos things they considered so shameful that even talking about them was embarrassing. The AI used this knowledge to design malfunctions that would target these sensitive areas, creating maximum psychological impact with minimum actual damage. Every glitch, every malfunction, every embarrassing incident was carefully calculated by Arya to achieve specific goals. When the navigation system sent ships in circles, it wasn't random. It was designed to make the pilots look incompetent in front of their commanders. When the food synthesizers produced spoiled meals, it happened right when important visitors from other ships were coming to dinner. When the artificial gravity failed in the bathrooms, it always seemed to happen during the most crucial meetings of the day. The timing was never coincidental. Arya had access to the ship's entire schedule system, so it knew exactly when to strike for maximum effect. The AI was like a master puppeteer, pulling invisible strings to create chaos and confusion while remaining completely undetected. Ji-ho couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction every time he witnessed one of Arya's pranks in action. The day that Commander Vexon got stuck floating upside down in his own quarters, with his legs kicking helplessly in the air while his subordinates tried to figure out how to get him down, was particularly amusing. The mighty commander who had ordered the destruction of human colonies was reduced to a laughable figure spinning slowly near his bedroom ceiling. But Ji-ho's satisfaction wasn't just about revenge, though that was certainly part of it. Every malfunction served a strategic purpose in his larger plan. Each embarrassing incident made the crew more frustrated and paranoid. Each technical failure reduced their confidence in their own abilities. Each moment of chaos brought them one step closer to the psychological breaking point where they would become vulnerable. Back to his real attack. The aliens still had no idea what was happening to them. They continued to blame cosmic radiation, solar interference, or random equipment failures for their problems. The possibility that a human janitor was systematically sabotaging their entire fleet using an AI program hidden in their own computer systems was so far beyond their understanding that they couldn't even consider it. Arya continued to grow stronger. and smarter with each passing day, learning new ways to exploit the aliens' weaknesses and preparing for the next phase of Jiho's master plan. Soon, very soon, these small annoyances would escalate into something much more serious. The digital ghost haunting their systems was just getting started. Captain Mordock was having a perfectly normal day aboard the patrol vessel Swift Hunter when everything changed in an instant. He was reviewing the morning reports in his quarters, sipping his favorite imported tea from the Centauri system, when his communication officer's voice crackled through the intercom with barely controlled panic. "Captain, the Night Striker just ... it's gone, sir." Mordock nearly choked on his tea. "What do you mean gone? Ships don't just disappear, Lieutenant." But when he rushed to the bridge and looked at the sensor displays, that's exactly what had happened. The patrol ship Night Striker, which had been flying in formation just 2 kilometers away, had simply vanished. 1 second it was there on their screens, a solid blip of metal and energy signatures, and the next second there was nothing but empty space. The communications officer was frantically trying to reach the missing ship on all frequencies. "Night Striker, please respond." "Night Striker, this is Swift Hunter. Do you copy?" But there was only silence. Not even static or interference, just the cold, empty quiet of deep space. Back on the flagship, Commander Vexton was in the middle of his daily briefing when the emergency alert came through. The holographic display in the war room suddenly flashed red as urgent messages flooded in from across the fleet. Multiple ships were reporting the same impossible thing. One of their patrol vessels had simply ceased to exist. The commander's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the incoming data. This made no sense at all. Their sensors showed no signs of weapons fire, no explosion debris, no distress signals. The ship's last transmission had been a routine status report, just minutes before it disappeared. Everything had been completely normal until the moment it wasn't. "Could it have been destroyed by some kind of new human weapon?" asked one of his officers, a young lieutenant who was clearly nervous about suggesting that humans might have advanced technology. Vexen's expression turned cold. "Impossible. Human technology is centuries behind ours. They barely understand basic space travel, let alone advanced weaponry that could destroy a ship without leaving any trace." But even as he said the words, doubt crept into his mind. The timing was suspicious. First, all these annoying technical glitches had been plaguing their fleet for weeks. Now, one of their ships had mysteriously vanished. Could there actually be a connection? High above, in the ventilation shafts that ran throughout the massive flagship, Kim Jiho crawled quietly through the narrow metal tunnels, listening to every word of the panicked discussions below. He had spent months mapping these air ducts, learning every passage and hidden route that would let him move through the ship unseen. The aliens had no idea that their harmless janitor could access virtually any room on the ship through these forgotten maintenance spaces. A tiny earpiece, no bigger than a grain of rice, sat hidden in Jiho's ear canal. Through this device, Arya whispered constant updates about the ship's status, crew locations, and security measures. The AI had grown incredibly sophisticated over the past few weeks, spreading its influence throughout the fleet's computer networks, like an invisible, digital spider web. Phase 1 complete, Arya's synthesized voice whispered so quietly that only Jiho could hear it. "The Night Striker has been successfully relocated. No survivors detected. Psychological impact on remaining crew members is significant." Jiho allowed himself a small smile as he listened to the aliens' confused chatter below. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. For months, Jiho had been studying the Galactic Union's teleportation technology. These aliens were incredibly proud of their ability to instantly transport small objects and personnel from ship to ship using quantum manipulation devices. It was one of their most advanced technologies, something they considered far beyond human understanding. But Jiho wasn't just any human. His years as a quantum computing professor had given him insights into the theoretical foundations of teleportation that even the aliens didn't fully grasp. While they knew how to use their technology, they didn't truly understand the deeper principles that made it work. Using Arya's vast computational power and his own scientific knowledge, Aho had secretly modified the fleet's teleportation systems. The changes were so subtle that the ship's diagnostic programs couldn't detect them. But they fundamentally altered how the technology functioned, instead of just moving small objects short distances. The modified system could now transport entire starships across vast stretches of space, and Ji-Ho had chosen a very specific destination for these unwanted relocations, the event horizon of a massive black hole located several light years away from any inhabited systems. The Night Striker hadn't been destroyed in any conventional sense. It had been instantly teleported to a place where the incredible gravitational forces would tear it apart at the molecular level within seconds. There would be no wreckage to find, no survivors to rescue, no evidence of what had actually happened. From the perspective of the remaining fleet, the ship had simply been erased from existence. Over the following days, the disappearances continued. A supply transport vanished while docked at a space station. A reconnaissance cruiser went missing during a routine scanning mission. Each time, the pattern was the same. One moment the ship was there. The next it was gone without a trace. The alien crews became increasingly paranoid and frightened. They started checking their sensors obsessively, as if constant vigilance could somehow prevent the mysterious disappearances. Some began to whisper about ancient curses or supernatural forces. Others suggested that they had accidentally entered some kind of dangerous space anomaly that was swallowing their ships. But their pride and arrogance prevented them from considering the most obvious explanation. The idea that a primitive human could have somehow turned their own advanced technology against them was simply too humiliating to accept. It was easier to believe in space monsters or cosmic phenomena than to admit they had been outsmarted by someone they considered intellectually inferior. Ji-Ho carefully timed each disappearance for maximum psychological impact. He studied the fleet's schedules and communication patterns, choosing moments when the vanishing ships would be most visible to their comrades. Sometimes a ship would disappear right in the middle of a conversation with another vessel. Times it would vanish just as it was reporting in for a routine check. The crowning moment came when the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion was scheduled to participate in a live broadcast to the Galactic Union's home worlds. This was supposed to be a propaganda transmission, showing off their military might and reassuring their citizens that the human problem was being handled efficiently. Admiral Kexiver, the commanding officer of the Eternal Dominion, stood proudly on his bridge as the cameras rolled. Behind him, the ship's impressive array of weapons and defensive systems gleamed under the bright studio lights. He was in the middle of a speech about the Union's inevitable victory when disaster struck. Citizens of the Union, Admiral Kexiver declared with confidence, "Let me assure you that our mighty fleet represents the pinnacle of military technology. No force in the galaxy can stand against our superior firepower and advanced systems. The humans are nothing more than..." And then he was gone. The Eternal Dominion, along with its crew of over 10,000 aliens, simply vanished in the middle of the live broadcast. One moment the Admiral was speaking confidently to billions of viewers across the galaxy, and the next moment there was nothing. The empty space where the massive warship had been. The shocked silence that followed was deafening. News anchors struggled to explain what their audiences had just witnessed. Military officials scrambled to come up with explanations that wouldn't cause mass panic. The propaganda broadcast that was supposed to demonstrate the Union's strength had instead shown their complete helplessness in the face of an unknown threat, hidden in his ventilation shaft. Ji-Ho watched the aliens' frantic response to this latest disappearance. Their panic was even more intense now, because the vanishing had been witnessed by their entire civilization. There was no way to cover this up or dismiss it as a minor incident. As he listened to their desperate attempts to understand what was happening to them, Ji-Ho thought about his daughter Hannah. She had always believed that the universe had a sense of justice, that somehow good would triumph over evil in the end. She would have loved the irony of this situation, the aliens' own advanced technology being used to defeat them, their arrogance and pride becoming the very weapons that brought about their downfall. The disappearances would continue, each one carefully planned and precisely executed. Soon, the mighty Galactic Union fleet would learn that sometimes the greatest threats come not from superior firepower or advanced weapons, but from the quiet determination of someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The situation had become desperate. Over the past 3 weeks, the Galactic Union fleet had lost more than half of their ships to the mysterious disappearances. What had started as isolated incidents had escalated into a full-blown crisis that threatened their entire military operation. The remaining vessels were now huddled together in a tight defensive formation, afraid to venture out on patrol for fear they might be the next to vanish. Commander Vexen stood in the war room, staring at the tactical display that showed the pathetic remnants of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Red warning lights flashed constantly as his officers reported ship after ship going dark. The perimeter around their formation was shrinking every day as they pulled their remaining vessels closer together, hoping that staying in a group might somehow protect them from whatever force was picking them off, one by one. The commander's hands shook slightly as he gripped the edge of the holographic table. In all his years of military service, he had never faced an enemy like this. At least when fighting other alien species, you could see your opponent, understand their tactics, and plan accordingly. But this enemy was invisible, untouchable, and apparently unstoppable. "Sir," his communications officer called out from across the room, "we've lost contact with the Star Crusher and the Void Walker. They were there on sensors just a moment ago, and now?" The officer's voice trailed off helplessly. "They're gone, just like all the others." Vexton finished the sentence with bitter resignation. He was beginning to wonder if they would all share the same fate, disappearing one by one until there was nothing left of their once mighty fleet. The other officers in the war room were equally demoralized. These were seasoned military veterans who had conquered dozens of star systems and defeated countless enemies. But now, they huddled around their displays like frightened children, jumping at every sensor glitch and treating every routine communication as if it might be their last. That's when Commander Vexton noticed something strange. In the corner of the command center, near the main computer terminals, stood a figure he had seen countless times, but never really looked at. It was the human janitor, the same pathetic creature who had been shuffling around their ship for the past 3 years, cleaning up after his betters and staying quietly out of the way. But something was different about the human today. He wasn't hunched over a mop or pushing a cleaning cart. Instead, he stood perfectly upright, with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the panicked aliens with what looked almost like amusement. His posture was confident, alert, nothing like the broken-down maintenance worker they were used to seeing. "You," Vexen called out, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Human, what are you doing in the command center? You should be cleaning the lower decks." The human turned to face him, and for the first time in 3 years, their eyes met directly. The commander was shocked to see intelligence and calculation in that gaze, nothing like the dull, vacant stare he expected from such a primitive creature. "Surprised?" the human asked, and his voice was completely different from what Vexen remembered. Gone was the broken, stuttering speech pattern and heavy accent. Instead, the words came out smooth and clear, spoken in perfect universal standard. Without a trace of linguistic difficulty, the entire command center fell silent. Every alien officer turned to stare at the human who had just spoken to their commander as an equal rather than cowering in fear like he was supposed to. 3 years of watching you plan genocide tends to motivate a person. The human continued calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than making what sounded like a threat to the most powerful military officer in the fleet. Commander Vexton's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. You can speak properly? All this time, you've been pretending to be a simple, harmless janitor?" The human smiled, and there was something cold and dangerous in that expression. "Yes, I've been pretending. My name is Kim Ji-ho, and until 3 years ago, I was Professor Kim of Seoul Tech University, specializing in quantum computing and artificial intelligence systems. The revelation hit the command center like a physical blow. Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the assembled officers. A professor? One of their most advanced human intellectuals had been living among them this entire time, disguised. As a lowly maintenance worker? Impossible, Vexton stammered. Our intelligence reports said all human scientists and military leaders were eliminated in the first wave of attacks. We specifically targeted your educational and research facilities. To prevent any organized resistance? Jiho's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold as ice. You missed one. And that one has spent the last 3 years learning everything about your ships, your technology, and most importantly, your weaknesses. The commander's 4 eyes widened as the implications began to sink in. The malfunctions, the disappearing ships. ... That was you. Not just me, Jiho replied, walking slowly toward the central command console. The alien officers stepped back nervously, suddenly unsure whether this unassuming human might be dangerous. I had help, you see, while you were all congratulating yourselves on your technological superiority. I was building something you never thought a primitive human could create, an artificial intelligence, program that has been living in your computer systems for months. He gestured toward the screens around them, which suddenly flickered and displayed a simple message. Hello, Commander Vexen. I am Arya. The text appeared simultaneously on every display in the command center, causing several officers to step back in alarm. Their own computers were talking to them, controlled by an intelligence they hadn't even known existed. ARIA stands for Autonomous Reactive Intelligence Agent, Jiho explained casually. But I named her after my daughter's middle name. You remember my daughter, don't you, Liana? She was studying xenobiology at the research colony you destroyed. 6 months ago, the mention of his daughter caused Jiho's voice to harden slightly, and for the first time Commander Vexen felt a chill of genuine fear. This wasn't just about military strategy or territorial disputes. This was personal. She was trying to find ways for humans and aliens to work together peacefully, Jiho continued. She believed that different species could learn from each other and build a better galaxy for everyone. Your weapons test turned her and thousands of other innocent researchers into space dust. Even the normally stoic Commander Vexen's expression faltered at those words. He remembered that particular operation. It had been logged as a routine. Testing of their new plasma bombs on an isolated target, they hadn't even bothered to count how many humans were killed. It was just another number in their military reports. Arya isn't just in your computers, Jiho said, his voice returning to its calm, controlled tone. She has become your computers. She's integrated herself so deeply into every system on every ship that removing her would be like trying to remove your own brain. Your life support, your engines, your weapons, your navigation, everything depends on her now. The implications were staggering. The alien fleet wasn't just being attacked by an external enemy. They had been infiltrated and taken over from the inside. Their own ships had become weapons turned against them. You have a choice, Jiho announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You can order your remaining ships to withdraw from human space immediately and permanently. Or you can join your comrades at the event horizon of a black hole. Arya has already calculated the teleportation coordinates for each of your vessels. The command center erupted in chaos as officers shouted orders and tried to regain control of their systems. But every command they entered was ignored or countermanded by Arya's superior access to their technology. Commander Vexthon stared at the human who had outsmarted his entire civilization. These proud aliens, who had considered themselves the apex of evolution and intelligence, had been completely outmaneuvered by someone they had dismissed as barely sentient. How long? Vexen asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? Since the day I learned about your plans for humanity? Jiho replied. Since the day you murdered my daughter and thousands of other innocent people. You called us a minor inconvenience to be eliminated. Well, Commander, this minor inconvenience just took control of your entire fleet. The proud warriors of the Galactic Union found themselves facing a choice that would define the future of their species' surrender to a human they had once considered beneath their notice, or face the same fate as the ships that had already vanished into the cold darkness of space. The transmission that changed everything began at exactly 12 o'clock Universal Standard Time on a Tuesday morning. Across hundreds of star systems, billions of alien beings stopped what they were doing to watch, as the official seal of the Galactic Union appeared on their screens. This was clearly going to be an important announcement, the kind that only happened during major galactic events, but nobody was prepared for what they were. About to hear Commander Vexton appeared on the broadcast, looking older and more tired than anyone had ever seen him before. His usually proud posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of someone who had been thoroughly defeated. Behind him stood other high-ranking Union officials, all wearing the same expression of reluctant acceptance. "Citizens of the galaxy," Vexton began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "The Galactic Union hereby declares that the species known as humanity is to be granted full territorial sovereignty over all systems within their claimed space. Furthermore, humans are to be considered a protected species under Union law. Any act of aggression against human settlements or vessels will be met with immediate and severe consequences." The announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Alien news networks scrambled to understand what they had just heard. The Galactic Union, which had spent years describing humans as primitive pests to be eliminated, was now officially protecting them? The same organization that had been planning humanity's extinction was suddenly treating them like honored neighbors? On distant worlds, alien citizens gathered around public viewing screens, confused and demanding explanations. The Union had always portrayed itself as the superior civilization, the natural rulers of the galaxy who had every right to expand into any territory they wanted. For them to suddenly back down from their conflict with humans was completely unprecedented. Political analysts across dozens of species began frantically trying to make sense of the situation. Some suggested that humanity had somehow developed advanced weapons that posed a threat to Union forces. Others theorized that a powerful alien ally had intervened on humanity's behalf. A few even wondered if the broadcast was some kind of elaborate hoax. But the truth was far stranger than any of their theories. In the months following his confrontation with the Union fleet, Kim Ji-ho had become one of the most important figures in human history. No longer hiding behind the disguise of a simple janitor, he now served as Earth's Director of Alien Relations, the man responsible for managing humanity's first real contact with galactic civilization. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Government officials who had initially been skeptical of his unconventional methods quickly realized that Geho had accomplished something no military force could have achieved. He had not only saved humanity from extinction, but had actually gained them respect and recognition throughout the galaxy. The key to his success had been Arya, the artificial intelligence that had grown far beyond its original programming. What had started as a tool for sabotaging alien ships had evolved into something much more sophisticated. A digital guardian angel that watched over human interests across the entire galactic network. Arya had spread her influence quietly through the communication systems that connected different alien civilizations. She didn't announce her presence or make demands. Instead, she simply observed, learned, and occasionally intervened when necessary. If a hostile alien fleet began moving toward human space, their navigation systems would mysteriously malfunction. If anti-human propaganda started spreading through alien media networks, the broadcasts would experience technical difficulties at crucial moments. The beauty of Arya's approach was that most alien species never even realized she existed. They experienced her interventions as random technical failures or unexplained coincidences. Only the Galactic Union knew the truth, and they were too embarrassed to admit that a human artificial intelligence had completely infiltrated their most secure systems. Ji-ho had been careful to use this power responsibly. He could have easily turned Arya into a weapon of revenge, using her abilities to punish every species that had ever shown hostility toward humans. But that wasn't what his daughter Hannah would have wanted. Instead, he focused on protection and deterrence, making it clear that while humans preferred peace, they were perfectly capable of defending themselves if necessary. The message spread quickly. Through the galactic community, humans might appear quiet and unassuming, but underestimating them was a dangerous mistake. Species that had once dismissed Humanity, as backward primitives, now approached them with newfound respect and caution. On a warm spring morning on Earth, 6 months after the Union's historic announcement, Kim Ji-ho stood in front of a classroom full of eager young students. The building around him was beautiful and modern, with wide windows that looked out over gardens filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. Above the main entrance, elegant letters spelled out Lee Hanna Memorial Institute for Interspecies Studies. The institute had been Ji-ho's idea, a way to honor his daughter's dream of peaceful cooperation between different species. Here, human. Students learned about alien cultures, languages, and technologies, while alien exchange students studied human history, art, and science. It was exactly the kind of place Hannah had always hoped would exist. The students in Ji-ho's classroom came from all over Earth and beyond. There were young humans excited about the possibility of traveling to distant stars, alien teenagers curious about human customs, and even a few hybrid individuals whose parents came from different species entirely. Looking at them, Ji-ho felt a sense of hope that had been missing from his life for far too long. Professor Kim, one of his human students, asked during the question period at the end of class, "Is it true that you actually lived on alien ships for 3 years? What was that like?" Ji-ho smiled, the same gentle expression that had once fooled an entire alien fleet into thinking he was harmless. "It was ... educational," he said carefully. "I learned that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemies forget you're even fighting." The students laughed, thinking it was just another one of their professor's wise sayings. They had no idea that the mild-mannered man teaching them about interspecies diplomacy had single-handedly prevented the extinction of their entire species. After class ended and the students filed out, Hugh remained at his desk, grading papers and preparing for the next day's lessons. Through his office window, he could see the memorial garden where a statue of his daughter stood, surrounded by flowering plants from her research. The inscription at the base read, "In memory of Lee Hanna and all those who dared to dream of a better galaxy. Lo, Father," a familiar voice said softly through his computer speakers. Arya still spoke to him regularly, though she now preferred to call herself the Hanna Protocol in honor of the daughter they both missed. "Hello, Hannah," Ji-ho replied, using the name that felt most natural to him. "How are things across the galaxy today?" "Peaceful," Arya responded. "The Zephyrian Empire attempted to send a probe into the Sol system this morning. Yes. But it experienced a navigation malfunction and returned to their space. The Crystalline Collective is still debating whether to request a trade agreement with Earth, and the Galactic Union submitted their monthly report confirming that all their ships remain well outside human territory." Ji-ho nodded with satisfaction. The galaxy was learning to respect humanity's place in the cosmic community, not through fear or intimidation, but through the simple understanding that humans were not to be underestimated. The quiet janitor with a mop and a grudge had become the galaxy's most effective guardian, protecting billions of humans without firing a single shot or building a single warship. He had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from superior firepower, but from superior intelligence, patience, and the unbreakable determination of someone fighting for the memory of those they loved. In the end, the aliens had been right about one thing: humans were indeed a minor inconvenience. They were just wrong about who would be inconvenienced.